wait a couple of minutes for everyone to join in. It's also live on Facebook now. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex. I am the co-manager of the Young Europeans Network, part of the 3 million team, and I'm really, really delighted to chair this webinar today. This is the fifth citizenship Q&A style webinar we have, and we had over 600 people registering to this webinar, so the most popular citizenship webinar already. I already see over 200 people on Zoom, so that's amazing, and more of you on Facebook as well. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. We'll be discussing our citizenship campaign, give some information about the application process, and answer to some of your questions. Whilst I still wait for some people, the number is still going up, so almost 240 on Zoom now. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Feel free to comment in the chat, and I'll do a bit of Zoom housekeeping in a minute. Citizenship is something that is really important to the 3 millions campaigns in the last years, but also really since the beginning. I got involved as a volunteer in the 3 million a lot more after the Home Office rejected my permanent residency application on my 24th birthday. And the reason was because the evidence I submitted for my permanent residence application for my CSI, Comprehensive Sickness Insurance, we'll discuss this today, was, in their words, unsatisfactory. I mean, since then I got settled status. I've been through the naturalization process as well. I found a different way to prove that I was, working during my studies. But citizenship is a really kind of complex process for a lot of people, including myself and many people who are volunteering with the campaign who've been through the process themselves or still face obstacles. So we are really campaigning on removing the barriers to citizenship, and my colleagues on the panel tonight will explain a bit about the barriers we're trying to remove, but also what the risks of applying can be and what things we need to consider in this process. A little bit of Zoom housekeeping before we go on to the panel discussion everyone is waiting for. You have the Q&A function, so if you're watching this on Zoom, you have the Q&A function. Here you can add your questions. A few of you submitted some questions via email before. The panel have seen those questions and will try to touch on some questions. But as I mentioned, there are now 273 of you on the Zoom webinar and another few people on Facebook as well, so about 300 people. So we'll try to get through as many themes as possible in the questions, but probably there will be more questions than we'll be able to answer tonight, but we will follow up on this webinar. So this webinar is recorded, is on the 3 millions Facebook. The video will stay there, and everyone who registered will receive the recording and also a range of resources with some further resource and signposting on citizenship if we don't manage to answer everything tonight. The people who are viewing on Facebook, hello there. If you're viewing on Facebook, I see more people joining on Facebook as well. I'll monitor the comments on Facebook as well, so if you have any comments or questions, you can use the comments underneath the video to put in your thoughts or questions to the panel. Before we start, I have a little poll here. I see still people joining. Wow, 280 now on Zoom. Welcome everyone. Good evening to all of you. And already Q&A started coming before we even start the panel, so that's great. We'll have a busy evening tonight. I will do a little survey now because it really does help us to kind of manage our campaigns and focus our campaigns in the 3 million, as well as knowing who is here in the audience tonight with us. So on your screen now, if you are watching on Zoom, you can see 3 questions. So first of all, a bit more about yourself, where are you at in the process, if you are British already, if you're thinking about this, or if you're someone who's not thinking about applying and you're just here for the debate and discussion and hearing more about our campaigns. A second question about what are the biggest barriers to people becoming British in your view? So cost, the comprehensive sickness insurance, the absence requirement, or others. Feel free to use the chat as well if your answers or your thoughts don't fit in those categories of the questions. And then also we have a third question about what you think that the 3 million should focus on in terms of our citizenship campaigning. So should we focus on reducing the cost on citizenship for adults, the comprehensive sickness insurance, providing more information, informative webinars like this, or other issues? So I will leave this poll on for a little bit, and now we will share the results at the end as well, or at some point in the panel, maybe after the panel speaks, so people have time to complete it, complete this short survey. So I'll leave it for a couple more minutes, so do fill it in. So I'm really delighted to have a good panel for you tonight to speak both about the practicalities of citizenship and answer some more practical questions, but also about what we're doing about this, what we're doing to remove the barriers for citizenship. So we have Chris Ben, who will speak first about some of the issues around citizenship applications, then Lara Parisotto, who will speak about the comprehensive sickness insurance and our campaign around removing that barrier, and then Luke Piper as well, who will speak about some of the considerations you need to look at when you think about applying for citizenship, such as the impact on family union rights and other issues as well. So without further ado, I'll hand over to Chris first to speak about some of those issues, and yes, do complete the poll meanwhile. I see a very good response, 80% response rate, great. So the last few people who are going to respond, please do so. So Chris, over to you first. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, and thanks to the Young Europeans for inviting me this evening to bring my thoughts about naturalisation and becoming a British citizen. And just to sort of talk about the process and to focus a little bit on the kind of the common themes that come up as problems or questions that I tend to get through practice as an immigration lawyer. So obviously, what we're talking about here is we're going to be talking about the process of becoming a British citizen via the naturalisation process. So that's where you effectively are asking the Home Office to make you a British citizen through your own choice. It's only for those who are over 18. Children have a slightly different scenario. But the first thing I always say is that no one needs to become a British citizen. I hope no one feels pressured into becoming a British citizen. If you've got status under the EU settlement scheme, if you've got settled status, that means that's your permanent right to stay in the UK. Pre-settled status holders, hopefully you're going to be getting settled status at some point in the future, which will then be your permanent right to stay here. So there's no requirement to become a British citizen, but of course for many it's a choice that they might be sort of thinking about progressing through. So if you are thinking about becoming British, now Luke's going to talk about some very important things to do with considerations sort of outside of the actual application process, which is really what I'll focus on. But if you are thinking about becoming a British citizen, it is a costly process, as everyone I think from the poll has indicated. They're aware of there are costs that come with this, and they are non-refundable costs if you don't meet the criteria. So the Home Office won't say, sorry, you don't meet the naturalisation criteria, here's your money back. They will keep the application fee even if you don't become a British citizen. So it's something to consider, because it's at the moment it's over £1,300, plus you have to do a Life in the UK test, which also costs additional, and you may have to do an English language test, which also costs extra as well. So there is a lot of cost associated with it. So that's obviously the first thing to think about. If you've decided that you're able to afford the cost and that's what you'd like to do, then you need to consider what's the qualifying criteria to become British. And just to be very clear, this won't, in the time we have available, I won't be able to cover every single qualifying criteria. So this is very much just to give you an idea of what you'll need to think about. But essentially, if you're naturalising this, the first thing to know, to think about is, are you already married to a British citizen or in a civil partnership with a British citizen? Because if you are, you'd still be naturalising, but you would have a slightly different qualifying period that you'd look at versus someone who it doesn't have that connection to a British citizen, who is just looking to naturalise. So there's slightly different qualifying periods if you're married or in a civil partnership with a British citizen already. Um, you have to think about how much time you spent away from the UK, because there is a residency criteria that comes with applying for naturalisation, and it always works backwards from the date you apply. So the qualifying periods that are relevant is a 5-year qualifying period if you're not married or in a civil partnership with a British citizen, and a 3-year qualifying period if you are. So you look back from that date of application over your qualifying period, and you have to, part of the application process is writing the dates that you have been outside the UK. So it might be quite a long and torturous process, but you actually have to work out which dates you have been away from the UK. It's not like the settlement scheme where you make a declaration about your absences. You actually have to write them down. How long have you been away, so that you can count up the days. Because when you've got a total of days, you have to look at it. I'll talk about the 5-year absences rules, which is about having less than 450 days outside the UK in a 5-year qualifying period, and then in the final 12 months of before your application date, you're not supposed to exceed 90 days. So of those 450 days, you shouldn't use more than 90 days in that last period before your application. So that's the general rules. And so it's a lot more strict than qualifying for settled status, which just has a 6-month residency rule. So some people will already know that they've been outside the UK for a long time. So if that's your situation, then you have to think about whether you might get a discretion from the Home Office, because in their guidance, they do apply discretion sometimes to those people who've been outside the UK for longer than the allowable absences of those 450 days in the 5 years. I can't really go into what circumstances they give the discretion, but obviously given our current situation, COVID-19, if you've been away recently because of the health pandemic, then that can form a reason for the Home Office to allow you to have some excessive absences. But really, if you're in that scenario where you have had a long time outside the UK and you're still thinking about naturalising, you probably want to run through it with someone who's qualified to go through the discretion in a lot of detail. And I think that's one of the main things that I talk to people about at the moment. And the other thing is about and it will lead into our conversation about CSI, which is, was I living in the UK under EU law before I applied to the settlement scheme? Probably, because most people will have applied to the settlement scheme, hopefully, by now. And so if you've got settled status under the scheme, because you can't apply if you have pre-settled status, but if you've got settled status, then that's great. That's part of the access to naturalisation. But you also have to look at your period before you were granted status under the scheme, and you have to look at how you were resident under European law, because that's part of the criteria for naturalising, is that in your application that you show that you were resident under EU law, which can be problematic for the CSI, the health insurance reason. But it doesn't. The naturalisation process applies to people who are working, to people who are self-employed. It's not just about CSI. It's just that your application is more straightforward if you have been exercising your EU rights as a worker or as someone who's self-employed. It's probably a little bit more straightforward to show that. And also, if you already did obtain a permanent residence document under the old EU system, that will go a long way to helping you to make your application to show that you were resident under EU law, because that's obviously what that document shows. So I think just as a sort of final thing to say about residence under EU law, which will form part of the application. And you see it if you look at the form, you'll see as an EU national, you're asked about how you're a resident here. And that's to say that residency under EU law can be very complicated. It can be straightforward. If you've been working all the time you're here, it's pretty straightforward. If you haven't been working, if you've been studying, or perhaps you were here with a family member, it will be potentially more complicated. But there are lots of different ways that someone may have been resident under EU law. And so it might be something that you can explore to see if you do fall within in that sort of criteria of being lawfully here under EU provisions before you apply to the scheme. And again, because of the cost involved with this application, it is really important that people do look into their position, because the Home Office does in their guidance documents, they do talk about the importance of explaining your residency under the EU law system. And then I'll pause there so we can move into a discussion about CSI, I'm sure.
Thank you very much, Chris, for that overview. It's really helpful, and I think it did touch on a few of the questions. I see the questions coming in really, really fast. We're at 37 open questions. Myself and Lara are trying to answer some of the easy ones in writing as well, but a lot of those questions around CSI requirements and other themes like absences will be addressed as well in our Q&A discussion, and the CSI in particular by Lara, who is our next speaker. So I'll invite Lara now to speak about our campaign to scrap the CSI requirement and the impact of CSI, as well as some of the I see some of the comments around the advantages of citizenship compared to settled status and how do we make decisions around that. So Lara can touch on that as well. So Lara, over to you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Yes, so I see some questions about, is it worth becoming a British citizen? And Alexandra has already touched on this, and citizenship is a personal issue. Some people want to become British citizens because they have lived in the UK for a certain number of years. They believe that their future will be in the UK, and they want their passport, their citizenship, to be reflected on how they feel. For some people, becoming a British citizen has an aspect of a sense of security. As we've said, like the EU settlement scheme and settled status is the indefinite leave to remain status that EU citizens now have in the UK. I'm not going to legally comment on how secure that is, but we do hear from some EU citizens that they don't feel secure enough with settled status only, because of what they hear in the news, or because of how they feel they've been treated in the past as EU citizens with the whole Brexit situation. But some people do want to then become a British citizen for that reason, so that they ultimately feel secure in the country that they wish to stay in. And with settled status, for example, an EU citizen can stay outside of the UK for up to 5 years without losing that status, continuous period of 5 years, and then being able to return without losing that settled status. Theoretically, with British citizenship, you could stay outside of the UK for however long you want and still come back and hold that citizenship. So again, like, that sense of security to some people is really important. I'm going to speak a little bit about my personal experience. I'm from Brazil, and I'm in Brazil right now. And I also have Italian citizenship. So I already have Brazilian and Italian citizenship. I am in the process of applying for British citizenship. I've already paid my fee. I've taken my Life in the UK test, and the application is being considered by the Home Office. I'm now just waiting to hear from them if I'll be granted it or not, so that I can book my citizenship ceremony, take a picture with the Queen, and get my black/blue passport. I think it's really, to me, it was really important. One, because, as I said, I have lived in the UK for 8 years now. I do think that my future will be in the UK. I can't say for certainty, things change, but I do think that it's what I want is for my future to be in the UK. And I feel like it's important for my citizenship to be reflected in that, simply from a personal standpoint of, I want to have that. To me, citizenship is meaningful. I have Italian citizenship, and although I'm very thankful for that citizenship, I don't feel Italian. That citizenship was thankfully passed down to me, but for example, I don't speak Italian. So in many ways, I feel a lot more British than I feel Italian, and I want to have that reflected on paper. But I also want to be able to vote in parliamentary elections. Outside of my work with the 3 million, I'm the co-manager of the 3 million Young Europeans with Alexandra. But outside, and before I started working, I've always been very active with politics in the UK. I studied politics at university. And I always wanted to be able to vote. I've only been able to vote in local elections. I haven't been able to vote in parliamentary elections. And it's something that to me is very, very important, because I'm someone that really truly believes in being able to vote where I live, to the point where I haven't even been voting in Brazilian elections or Italian elections in the past few years, because I don't feel like I should have a say in how those countries are run if I don't live there and I don't pay my taxes there. But with the UK, I do live there, I make use of the public services, and I pay my taxes, and yet I am not able to vote. So for those reasons, I am in the process of applying for citizenship. Now, those are my personal reasons, and I've said, like, some people just feel British, some people want that security of British passport, some people like me want to be able to vote in parliamentary elections as well. And that's also the kind of things that we hear from some of our young volunteers or other members of the public that write to us in the 3 million, saying that they want to become a British citizen. And for us to be able to get to that British citizenship, there are some barriers. One of them is the high cost of citizenship. So as I said, it cost me £1,330 to make that application, alongside some other costs like the Life in the UK test, lawyer fees, and so on and so forth. And also, so there is that cost, which we hoped can be lowered, especially for children. The cost for the application, citizenship application for children, is also quite high. But another huge barrier, which I believe a lot of you are here for to understand a little bit more about, is the comprehensive sickness insurance issue, which Chris has just briefly explained. In the previous webinar last year, I did a little bit of a presentation, so I'm just going to quickly share my screen just and run through the slides very quickly. Ignore the really weird photo on the side there. But so as Chris said, comprehensive sickness insurance is a requirement that I'll use my experience again. When I was at university, I was studying full time. I was only attending my lectures and studying, I wasn't working. So during that period, the government considers that I should have had comprehensive sickness insurance because I wasn't paying taxation. Therefore, I should have been contributing to the National Health Service in a different way. No one, when I went to university, made me aware of that requirement. So it was only when I graduated and started working for the 3 million and volunteering with the 3 million that I discovered that I should have had this requirement. And as I said, the problem is that a lot of people don't know about this requirement, and it ends up affecting our ability to apply to become a British citizen, but it also affects the ability of EU parents. For example, if I had had a child during university, even if I had settled status, my child wouldn't have been able to automatically become a British citizen because I didn't have comprehensive sickness insurance. So that is a barrier to the citizenship of children as well. So as I said, there's a barrier to naturalization. There's a barrier to, I'll let Luke touch more on that later. And there's the barrier to children born in the UK. Our solution is an amendment to the British Nationality and Borders Bill, which is currently going through Parliament. It's currently with the House of Lords, and our amendment basically asks that a comprehensive sickness insurance, that requirement that many of us should have had but didn't have, be satisfied but by the simple access to the NHS in practice, as in I was able to use the NHS on a daily basis when I needed, and when I went to my local GP surgery, no one ever asked me if I had comprehensive sickness insurance. We have done some work in Parliament, and that amendment was tabled at committee stage by Bambos Charalambos, Member of Parliament, and it then got retabled at report stage, and even though it didn't go through because of various different parliamentary reasons, that amendment is now hopefully going to be retabled, at the House of Lords, where the bill is at the moment. And there will be a discussion in Parliament, in the House of Lords, and it then might be reconsidered in the House of Commons. And that's where it's really important that all of you stay involved with us, stay involved with our campaigns, then make sure that you're subscribed to our newsletter, following us on social media, because very soon we're going to have a call to action. We're going to ask you to write to a Lord, so that they are aware of our amendment and are going to the House of Lords and are going to be debating and are going to be speaking in favor of this comprehensive sickness insurance issue being addressed. It's something that we hope to benefit many EU citizens like myself and like many of you. So please stay involved with us. As I said, these are some of the reasons why I think it's important for myself to become a British citizen. To me, it is worth it. To some of you, I know it will be worth it as well. But Luke will cover a little bit of some of the considerations that we all need to have. And just to add, as I said, I didn't have comprehensive sickness insurance, and I made the application for citizenship anyway. So hopefully everything will be okay, but there is still the potential, even if unlikely, that my citizenship application could be rejected on that basis that I didn't have comprehensive sickness insurance. So that's why it's so important that our campaign and advocacy work has your support, so that legal barrier is removed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lara. I'm posting some links in the chat. The questions are coming in really, really quick, and like many comments on Facebook as well. So for those watching on Facebook, please keep on sharing your experiences in the comments there as well. I'm posting some comments that Lara mentioned about volunteering with us, subscribing to the newsletter, where you get regular campaign updates. If you're not yet subscribed to our newsletter, and I'll post some other resources as well in the chat. May I please ask again, if you want for us to see your questions for the Q&A part of the panel, please do use the Q&A chat, which is at the bottom of Zoom, which is different from the chat on the side, because otherwise things get lost in the chat and it's really difficult to reply to things. And some of us are replying to some of the comments in writing as well. So we have like 63 questions already, and 12 were responded in writing. So there's a lot of questions to go through. Yeah, I'll hand over to Luke now to speak about some of the considerations in applying for citizenship. And I see already some comments and questions around family reunion and dual citizenship as well. So Luke can speak through some of those points, and then we can go to the Q&A, picking up on some of the questions. So Luke, over to you.
Thanks very much, Alexandra. Naturalization is a very complicated area, and when you add things into that, like comprehensive sickness insurance and lawful residence and living, not breaking the rules and things like that, it can be very daunting for people. So for those who are coming to this brand new, fresh, and haven't really thought about it, or have had a cursory sort of look at things, we really impress on you that you should look at the resources that we put together, where we do go things in a lot more step-by-step basic way, because everybody's at different stages of thinking about this journey and this process, particularly when you're potentially going to spend a lot of money. In that spirit, it's not just also important to think about what is the criteria to becoming a British citizen by naturalization, but you also need to think about what are the consequences, what are the risks associated with it. Sometimes it can just seem like something that's really straightforward and, oh, well, I'll become British and everything will be fine. But there are some potential risks to going on this journey and becoming a British citizen. And the two most obvious ones are dual nationality and something that's called family reunion. So the first is a bit easier to sort of understand. So some countries that you are a national of don't like it if you try to get another nationality. and they have restrictions on people becoming a national of another country. It feels very old-fashioned. It feels like something from the Victorian period, which it kind of is, I guess, where countries are very protective over their nationals acquiring other nationalities. So it's something that you have to think about very carefully, because there are some countries that do frown upon it. There are some countries which don't really care. Some require you to apply for exemption. So you have to make sure that you've got a special excuse to becoming a dual national. Like Germany, for example, they don't allow dual nationality, but people can apply to the German authorities to essentially get permission. And there are some countries where in certain circumstances you would lose your nationality if you became a dual national. So what's the way forward with this in terms of thinking about what to do and get information and advice on these things? Well, the starting point often is your consulate or embassy in the UK. Now, for some people, they'll roll their eyes when they hear me saying that, because they'll be like, "What, contacting my embassy? They're useless." But some of them do have things on their website. They do have devoted teams who can give you this information. Also, speaking to lawyers that specialise in immigration in your country of origin, where you're national of, is a really, really good way of finding out what are the restrictions and what are the risks. There are hundreds of countries in the world, and obviously we're not going to sit here and go through all of them, and some of them have very complicated paths to navigate. For example, the German one, I had no idea that you could apply for a special exemption until very, very recently. Somebody told me and explained the process to me. And likewise in the Netherlands, there are certain circumstances where you would lose your British citizenship if you became a dual national, but there are certain exemptions around that. For example, if you're married to a British citizen. So there's lots of things to think about there, but it's rather than me giving you the answers, which unfortunately we can't do, it's me saying you really should think about this before going ahead. Now, the second thing to think about, and this is very particular to EU citizens who came to the UK before the end of December and are thinking and have applied to the settlement scheme and have got status to stay here, so they've been through that process and are thinking about becoming British. Now, under the withdrawal agreement, which is this document, this agreement that the UK and the EU agreed with each other about protecting our rights to live in this country, there is a really key right in there that's called family reunion. What that basically means is that you have a right to bring your family to the UK, and that you don't have to go under the UK immigration rules, which are really tough, really expensive, and sometimes impossible to meet. You can use your rights under protected EU law, which is under this agreement. So that includes bringing over your spouse, if you married before the deadline. It could be bringing over your mother or your father if they're dependent on you, and they may in the future become poorly and you might need some help too, and then they can come to the UK and be with you here. Now, if you've got settled status or pre-settled status, you can bring your family member over here simply just by, if it's your parent, by them being dependent on you. You don't need to show much else, really, and it's a free application. However, if you go on to become a British citizen, then a different set of criteria would apply if you were trying to exercise that freedom of movement right, that free movement right to bringing your family to the UK. Now, this criteria causes lots of problems if you didn't have comprehensive sickness insurance in in the period before you apply to become British. Now, as we talked about, it's a bit complicated, but if you, when you're looking at your application for citizenship and you identify that the comprehensive sickness insurance issue is a problem for you, so you didn't have it during the period that you were looking to rely on to become British, if you didn't have it and you needed to have it, it is very likely that that will impact on your ability to bring your family member in the future to the UK. So we're thinking particularly, as I said, about mothers and fathers and things like that. So it's really, really important to make sure that you are aware of this, because it could impact on your ability to have a family member join you, well, your parent join you in the years to come. Now, for some people, that may feel like a very remote possibility. You might be Lara's age, or, you know, well, to be honest, it doesn't matter what your age you are. I mean, you could be as old as I am, and be thinking, oh, well, like hell would I want to bring my mother here and living with me? She'd drive me mad. But life is funny, and sometimes you don't know what comes at you, and it may be that you do want to do that when your parent is ill or poorly in the future. So if you do come across this CSI barrier, think carefully, think about what the potential impact could be for you, and you know, take that into consideration. If you're concerned about it, if you're worried about it, you're worried that it's going to touch on your application, we've got lots of materials, as I've said before, but you should also, if you're really, really not sure, think about getting some legal advice, and there's lots of good lawyers out there, Chris being one of them, who I'm sure would be happy to take instructions and look into your case, and it's worth doing. So I think I've talked enough about those two things. One last thing to say is that, and this is really something that is only for a certain type of person, but there are tax considerations as well to think about when taking on other nationalities. Like, it can have some implications depending on where you're domiciled and things like that. It's always good to, if you're one of those people, to talk to your accountant about. Yes, so those are the potential risks. So I think we'll slide now to the Q&A bit, won't we, Alexandra, where I've just looked again now, we've got almost 80 questions here.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luke and Lara and Chris as well for your interventions. I do hope some of the issues were touched on by the panel so far. We have almost 80 questions, 26 we try very quickly to answer in writing, Chris, Lara and myself, and we have about over 20 comments / questions on Facebook as well. So before we go on to the question, just out of curiosity for everyone who completed the survey, I'll share a bit the results of the survey whilst the panel have a bit of time to look at some of the questions. And I'll try to take 4 or 5 questions at a time and open up to the panel so we can cover as many as we can in the next 35 minutes for questions until like 7:15. So yeah, we'll have a bit of time for questions. So yeah, most of you, so over 70% here in the audience today on Zoom, are EU citizens thinking of applying for British citizenship, which makes sense because you are here to get some information, but also have quite a sizable percentage who are not thinking of applying, and it's really important again to kind of have this discussion about citizenship being a personal choice, and everyone having like a different view on whether it is worth it or not, hence the title of our debate tonight. We also have the biggest barrier. So the biggest barrier for people here in the room is the cost, with almost 50% saying the cost is the biggest barrier, followed by the CSI requirement. A lot of other barriers mentioned in the chat, but it's actually very interesting because the cost is, of course, one of the highest costs for naturalization comparing to many other countries, and I put a paper in the Q&A when we compare the cost of applications. What should the 3 million campaign focus on? Again, the cost is winning, reducing the cost for citizenship for adults, but also very, very closely followed by scrapping the CSI requirement, which is obviously the campaign that Lara spoke about that we are doing right now. and also very closely followed by providing information. So over half of the people here want to have more information. So yeah, that was really interesting. Thank you everyone for completing this. So let's go to the Q&A. We have a lot of questions here, so I'm trying to put, again, I'll put all the panel on the screen now so you can see everyone on the screen, and I will pick a few questions, like a few themes, and open up to whoever wants to address those questions on the panel. So there are questions to continue with the CSI and requirements theme. There are questions about, well, when did the CSI requirement become active? What's kind of the difference between this 5-year residency and kind of 10 years, looking back at CSI for 10 years, the good character requirements? So there are questions around that. There are also, let me see what else I can tie this into. There are questions around family reunion as well. Let me see. Yeah, there are questions around absences. Maybe let's take CSI, kind of like the history of the CSI, the 10-year versus the 5-year issue, and also the questions around absences. So what counts as an absence from the UK? Do I need to have all my tickets? Do I need to have all the evidence for that? And what happens if I actually don't satisfy, don't really tick the box of the absence requirement? Can I make a case for discretion on absences? So maybe let's open with those, and meanwhile I'll collect some other questions. I'm not sure if Chris wants to start first, and then Luke, or yeah, whoever wants to jump in those topics.
Thanks, Alex. I mean, so CSI has been a part of the EU law, which was sort of consolidated in 2004 with the Free Movement Directive, and in the UK that came into effect in 2006. So the UK legislation that provided for EU free movement law has always had the requirement for CSI, health insurance comprehensive. I'm sorry, because I realized that some of the questions actually said, what do you mean when you're saying CSI? Because we're so used to talking about it, but we mean comprehensive sickness insurance, health insurance, of course, as we've talked about. But it's been there since the day one of the sort of the free movement laws that we know today, which is what leads to permanent residency and things. And it's just that there's been various points in time where it has become sort of more prominent for various reasons. There's been some changes to certain aspects of it over time. There was an issue back in 2012, for example. But the one of the problems with CSI is because it's always been there. It's not clear whether based on the Home Office guidance about CSI and the fact they can apply a discretion if you were supposed to have it but you didn't have it. It's not clear whether sort of just not knowing about it is one of the reasons why you can say, well, you should still process my naturalization application, because it seems sort of fair. I mean, no one generally was asked for it. I've seen comments about GPs and the NHS, and of course they didn't ask for it. And so to then sort of turn around and find out now that it actually matters or could matter in a naturalization application feels like a bit of a sort of kick in the stomach. But the difficulty is that it has been there for all this time, and so that's why we have to be careful about about how you do approach discretion with the naturalization application, and not say, well, it can't have applied because I've been here since like 2006, because it still did apply in that era. Shall I start? I'm so happy for someone else to come in on the absences. I don't mind carrying on.
Maybe a follow-up, because on the same thing before I move on to absences, I see a couple of questions here, so it's really difficult to look for like hundreds of questions. A follow-up on the CSI is actually what counts as evidence of CSI. Someone asked, for example, if I'm studying, what could count as evidence of CSI if I'm a student, and also I worked part-time during my studies. Do I need CSI, and what is the kind of threshold to qualify as a worker rather than a student, and therefore not needing CSI as a worker? So maybe we can follow up on that before we move on to absences and that kind of requirement.
Just to say, I think it's really important to be quite clear about something here, because I've noticed that there's some slight confusion from people in the chat. You only need to have had this comprehensive sickness insurance in a period of time before you got your pre-settled or settled status. So if you're applying for British citizenship, so you've got your settled status, and you're looking back and you've got a period before you had your pre-settled or settled status, and you've got a period where you're living in the UK in that qualifying period where you didn't have a settled status, an EU settlement scheme status, and you're essentially relying on what's called EU law. And in that period of time, if you weren't working, if you weren't self-employed, so if you were studying here, if you were, I don't know, married to a British citizen and not working, then it's very likely that you would need to have had, in addition to being a student here and relying on somebody else's income, to have had some form of comprehensive sickness insurance. Now, what is it? What does it look like? It is an enigma. It is a mystery even to this day. There are some things that do very clearly, easily meet the criteria of what you needed to have had. So if you had private medical insurance that covered the majority of your health needs, it is likely that the Home Office would accept that, but you should definitely seek advice for somebody to look at the terms of the contract and talk you through what your options are and what the risks are potentially, because of this because of the policy. If you didn't have any policy, some countries had some kind of special arrangement, but again, it's something that's really important to go away and check and clarify on. If this is sounding like something that applies to you, it's definitely worth reading upon and looking at our resources and just checking it through to be sure that it is something that you needed to have had, because it may be you just need to wait a little bit longer and you don't need to provide CSI because your qualifying period will shift a little bit in time. So this is more about us flagging with you that if you're one of these people that sort of fit, you sounds like you fit in these situations, it's really, really important to look into it and really, really take your time with it, because it's still a problem, and it will continue to be a problem for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think that's very important to clarify this, because often, especially from students, we got those questions when actually we notice some students have been working throughout their studies and actually could qualify as a worker. So again, if you're unsure, like really it is worth seeking that legal advice and knowing what your situation is. I mean, maybe back to Chris in terms of there are a lot of questions on the evidence of CSI, what counts as CSI. So, people asking, I had private health insurance as I moved to the UK. Does it count as CSI? I received a bursary at university. Does that count as working? What kind of evidence of CSI there is in general? There are like a lot of questions. Apologies to everyone. We can't take all the 90 plus 44 questions individually plus the comments, but kind of like, an overall of what really counts as evidence of CSI.
Yeah, I mean, I think Luke has touched on this, and forgive me if I repeat anything because I was trying to type answers at the same time. But if someone has private health insurance that covers them in the UK, then quite clearly that meets the requirement. I believe there's a link on the 3 Million website to a helpful, and I know we're going to circulate links here, but to a helpful sort of explanation. I'm just answering an answer about European health insurance cards. Are they valid as comprehensive health insurance? Yes. They can't be issued by the UK, of course. They have to be issued by another member state, and they need to be valid for whatever period you want to rely on it. So if you were 3 years as a student and then 2 years as an employee, you just need a health insurance card that covers the 3 years as a student. That would be fine. So as soon as you move into this, what we'd sort of see as an economically active capacity, like a worker, an employee, a self-employed business person, you forget about CSI. It just disappears as a requirement because you're economically active. It's there for people who are sort of not deemed as economically active, like students or retired people and so on. I think there was a question just related to that about what is someone as a who had a job at university, can they argue that they were employed as a worker rather than having to worry about CSI. In some cases, yes, it will depend on how much work you were doing. So the Home Office, when they look at someone who says, no, I'm a worker rather than a student, they start by looking at about whether the person paid national insurance during their employment, and how obviously how long the employment was going on for. So if you were paying national insurance because you earned enough in a week to pay national insurance, you're automatically basically considered a worker by the Home Office. If you didn't do enough hours to make a national insurance contribution, you may still be able to argue that you were sort of effectively a part-time worker if you did enough hours. If we're talking about 1 or 2 hours a week, that's unlikely to meet the threshold to be considered to be employed. But the first thing to look at is national insurance contributions, because if you're making those, you're considered to be a worker and you don't need to even think about CSI.
Thank you for that, Chris. Let's take a different set of questions around. Well, actually, can we deal with the absences theme first in terms of like what are the absence requirements? And I think we got this question, one of the pre-submitted ones. People asking, like, do I really have to find all my travel tickets? Do I have to find the exact date I arrived in the UK? And how do I even remember my 30 years of history in terms of going in and out of the UK? And if I don't have some data, if I don't remember something, what can I do? Can I explain this in a cover letter, or what can I do around that? So if we can deal with that kind of question first, and then I will take a couple of different themes.
Sure. So when we're talking about absences, we're talking about looking back from the day you apply. You either need to give information about 5 years of absences, or if you're married to a British citizen, if you're in a civil partnership with a British citizen, you only need to give 3 years of absences. So for someone who's been in the UK for 30 years, you're not being asked to produce 30 years worth of dates that you've been in and out of the UK. You'll be asked to cover either the last 5 years or the last 3 years. So that's the first thing. You don't need to put forward evidence of the travel. You don't need to produce travel tickets, itineraries, and things like that. You'll be asked to list them in the application document. You have to enter them. The Home Office basically says in their guidance, unless we think that someone's sort of really not giving us the correct information, then we'll generally accept what they say about their absences in and out of the UK, as long as we can see that they are present in the UK through other means like your work records or your documents that are addressed to you. The Home Office says, well, we'll take your word that you're giving us the right information about your travel absences. For someone who can't remember everything in the last 5 years or 3 years, there's a box at the end of the online. You fill out an online application form most of the time for nationality, and at the end it says, do you want to give us any other information? And if you're really unsure about the travel dates you've given, it's worth writing into that I-5 to say, I've given the information to the best of my knowledge, based on the records I can find. So I believe this is to be correct, because people sometimes say to me, can the Home Office tell when I haven't been in the UK? Generally speaking, probably not. But there's always a chance, they collect passenger information from carriers and so on. So you wouldn't want the Home Office saying, oh, you were definitely traveling on this date and you've not declared it. But so if you're worried about that, it's always you can just put in and say, look, I've given this information to the best of my understanding and it's correct as far as I know.
Thank you very much. That's really, really helpful. Okay, so different themes now. I know there are a lot more questions on the CSI, so I'll post on the chat as well again a link which is called 101 questions on citizenship answered, which are a collection of questions from our previous webinars as well, and they have about 30 questions on different scenarios on CSI, again answered by an immigration advisor. So you'll get some of the information there, and hopefully this will answer most of the questions. And we'll take on board any kind of new questions this webinar as well. So there are some questions about child citizenship, I think a couple of them are around how do I know if my child is actually born British, and the implications of the changes in the legislation. So maybe that's one of the themes, about child citizenship, and how can we check if a child is British born or needs to register or needs to naturalize. That is an entire webinar. We had like a webinar only like addressing those issues. So again, we can have a brief answer today, and then we can you have some resources where you can look at the different routes as well in our citizenship fact sheet that I'll post on the chat. But also let's also look at the question around the Nationality and Borders Bill and people concerned about Clause 9 and deprivation of citizenship, and how, what is the impact of this, and like what are we doing on this, if anything, as an organization. That's maybe one for Luke to respond. So maybe starting with Chris on child citizenship, what are the best resources to look at, how can we know if a child is British, and look on Clause 9, and then we can approach another set of themes.
Yeah, so again, yeah, you're absolutely right, Alex. We may as well do another couple of hours on child nationality situations, but to try to give some of the more simple situations to think about is essentially children born in the UK. So that's the one where when your children are born outside the UK and they've come with you to the UK, generally speaking, they are they're not going to become British by anything that sort of happens, and like they'll apply under the settlement scheme like you will. They may be able to become British at a later date, but there's no sort of automatic right for children born outside the UK to apply to become British, unless one of the parents has a connection as a British citizen. For children born here, the rule is basically, mainly the rule is, if one of the parents is considered to be a settled permanent resident at the date the child is born, then the child will automatically be a British citizen and the child applies for a passport. If the child is born and neither of the parents is considered to be settled permanently resident at the time the child's born, the child won't automatically become British. There is some very minor exceptions to that, which I won't go into now, but that's the basic rules. So essentially, if you have settled status, or your partner has settled status and you're going to have a child together and they're born in the UK, that child's going to be a British citizen. If you both have pre-settled status and you have a child, then your child is not going to be born a British citizen. They will need to apply to the settlement scheme, but they may have an opportunity to become a British citizen if you pay the Home Office as it stands today. If you pay the Home Office, if you then if you got your own settled status, once you get that settled status, if your child was born here when you had pre-settled status, you've then become a parent who is settled and permanently resident here. So your child then can apply to become a British citizen if you wanted them to, and if you're willing to pay the Home Office fee as it stands today. So the difference with kids is they may be born British, but if they're not born British, if they are born here, they may have an opportunity to apply to become British at a later stage if one of the parents becomes a settled parent. Those are really the two main scenarios. Luke is going to have to help me out with because I can never quite get the acronym of the organisation who's the best on child nationality information.
PRCBC.
Thank you. Sorry.
I've posted a link to their resources in the chat here. But yeah, I mean, as Chris is saying there, it's a very complicated area of law because it's reliant not just on what your circumstances are at the time, but also the period in time when you may have had a child. But the resources that PRCBC have put together are fantastic. They've got a really lovely flow chart that you can use to find out whether or not a child is automatically a British citizen, or if they need to apply to register to become one. So if you have any doubts and questions or concerns about that, it's, from what Chris has said, then it's definitely worth having a look at their resources. Now, there's a couple of people been asking, will this thing be available? Is it being recorded? And I think it is, isn't it, Alexandra? So people can.
Yes, sorry for those who joined a bit later and on Facebook as well. It is recorded. It's on the 3 Million Facebook page to stay there live because it's live, so the video stayed there, and everyone who registered will receive an email with all those links and the recording as well.
So we've seen some questions in here, and I've replied to one of them already about concerns around the citizenship deprivation clauses. The no notice clause that's been added to the Nationality and Borders Bill, which I'm sure lots of people have heard about in the news, and what the government is wanting to do is to basically remove the requirement for them to give notice to somebody if they lose, if they're going to take away their citizenship. It's important to say that depriving somebody of their citizenship is a very serious thing, and is something that should only be done sparingly. And in the past years, there has been an increase in the numbers of cases where people have had their citizenship taken away from them, but they have only been in quite serious cases. The problem is, though, that this comes to a more fundamental question, whether we should be stripping people of their citizenship. Is it the right thing to do in a world where citizenship is not just, it's something that you have, it's a part of your identity. And the government of today would have you believe that citizenship is a right. Sorry, the other way around. Citizenship is a privilege, it's not a right. Whereas I would say, and I'm sure a lot of other people would say, that it is a right, not a privilege. And these deprivation clauses create a division in our society between those who don't have another nationality or some other entitlement to have another nationality, and those that do, which is a dangerous thing in my view. And it's a view that we share in the organisation, because there shouldn't be any difference between a person born British and a person who becomes British by naturalisation, or a person who is born British and so happens to be that they have a nationality with another country. So we've joined forces with some other organisations from across the communities, and there is a petition together that I'm posting a link to here, which is some more information that the Good Law Project are leading on, where we are asking for this government to take a step back and do away with these it's more medieval, I would say, ways of dealing with people, but banishing them from their country and things like that. And we are, will be. If this petition hits the mark that it needs to do, then we will be working with these organisations to try and shift a change. And there does seem to be an appetite for it in the House of Lords during the debate in the Nationality and Borders Bill, where it says that there is a lot of people who are saying we need to change. This is a moment to think again about what we do with citizenship. And given that so many people, EU nationals, are going on this journey to become a British citizen, it's a really important moment, I think, for us to come together and have our voices heard via petitions and things like that. So I hope you will join in that. But I think it's important to put into context that whilst this deprivation thing does happen, the numbers are low, so people shouldn't be afraid, but be known that the scope of when this can be used is very broad, but it strikes to a much bigger question, in my opinion, about who we are and on our identity. So hopefully you'll be joining us in this campaign. That'd be great. Also, please do be sure to sign up to our newsletter for more information on this and other work that we're doing. So I think that covers it, doesn't it?
Yeah, thank you, Luke, for that. So we still have some time. I thought like the webinar was until like quarter past, but apparently it was still half past. So we'll take a couple more rounds of questions. It's really difficult to pick which questions to to ask the panel, because some of them are really really detailed. So again, like I think with some of the questions that are really complex and detailed, it may be worth checking out our resources that I put on the chat on the 101 questions to citizenship for citizenship, and the citizenship fact sheet. And the fact sheet link in the chat does include a list of various organizations, including Seraphus and others who do provide advice on citizenship. So you have a list of organizations if you want to discuss very detailed and personal accounts as well. So I'm looking at I mean, there are a lot. It's interesting, the Facebook debate. I'm looking at the Facebook comments as well, and there's a lot of debate there around taxation and representation. The fact that people are saying, like, why can't we have voting rights even without citizenship? Why should citizenship be linked to voting rights? So maybe I'll bring in Lara to briefly say a little bit about our work on voting rights at the local elections as well, and what, how voting rights links to the citizenship, and what are we doing on that area. So I see a few comments on this, maybe like a lighter a lighter topic. So yeah, maybe Lara first, and then I'll pick up some more questions, a couple more questions.
Yeah, so alongside our advocacy work on the Nationality and Borders Bill, we also have a little bit of advocacy campaigning work on the Elections Bill. A lot of you as EU citizens may have voted in local elections in the past, and there will be more local elections on the 5th of May. Today marks 100 days until the next local election. And we have a campaign called Our Home, Our Vote. We believe that any resident of the UK should have the right to vote, at the very least, in local elections. There are already many migrants, many UK residents who do vote in those local elections, namely EU citizens, as well as qualifying Commonwealth citizens and Irish citizens as well. But we would like to extend that franchise to all residents. So Americans, Brazilians, Russians, any local resident that lives in the UK. This is something that is already a reality in Scotland and in Wales. So local residents of those nations can vote in the Scottish Parliament elections and the Welsh Assembly elections. So it's something that we hope to be extended to other to the rest of the UK, to England and Northern Ireland. When it comes to parliamentary elections, our campaign at the moment doesn't focus on the extension of the franchise to parliamentary elections for all residents, because one, we are operating in the context of the Elections Bill, which aims to make voting rights changes of EU citizens in local elections. So that's where our focus is at the moment. But also because we do have this campaign focus on making access to British citizenship, as in to naturalization, easier as well. So in terms of parliamentary elections, there could be a way of more migrants like myself, like Alexandra, voting for members of parliament by becoming British, if that's someone's ambition. So if we make the path to choose naturalization easier by, for example, reducing the cost, and by, for example, removing this comprehensive sickness insurance barrier, which is what we're trying to do, then we can have a little bit of best of both worlds. So extension of the franchise at the local level, but also the ability to vote at general elections by making access to citizenship easier. And again, to emphasize, that's why it's so important that you as a supporter, a follower of the 3 Million and the Young Europeans Network, stay involved with us, staying updated on social media. So when we have those call to action, as in like write to your member of parliament, write to your councillors, sign this petition, you can be involved and slowly but surely making those policy changes that will benefit us.
Thank you, Lara, for that. I see some comments, people saying like, well, there's no answer to my question. I mean, I have to say we received about 200 questions only on Zoom. That's only on the Q&A in addition to the ones on the chat. So it will be like, unless we stay here until probably 4 a.m. in the morning, it will be impossible to go through every single one of them. So I hope the conversation is helpful to address most questions. But I will send to everyone who registered for the webinar a list of different resources. So on child citizenship, there are some resources already with the different routes for your child to become British that are put together by PRCBC, for example. So we link to that resource. There are resources around the CSI questions. We have a document with about like 30 or 40 questions around CSI with different scenarios. So you'll get all those resources afterwards as well. So I'll bring in a different topic now. Like I'll bring in 2 more rounds of questions and then just wrapping up with everyone from the panel just saying we know what next in terms of the next steps and what can you do. Um, so there are some questions around which I thought would be interesting for a lot of people on here on this chat and on Facebook as well, around marriage and how marriage to a UK citizen actually impacts the process. So for instance, like a question here, does marriage impact the need to have CSI? How does it impact my residence? Does it have any advantage in terms of like being actually married to a British citizen in terms of the application? So maybe that's um, one for Chris. And then also a very common question I think a lot of people asked, for instance, can you recommend any immigration advisor? How do I find an advisor in my region? Are there any kind of resources on how to actually find further advice? Again, I posted the citizenship fact sheet in the chat that includes some organizations, but maybe someone can speak, maybe Luke can speak a bit about the process of how to kind of take the next step if you feel like you need more advice, and when to know that you actually need advice. Some people asking, how do I know I actually need advice? Maybe it's straightforward and I can apply for it myself without needing necessarily advice, while others are unsure. So maybe those questions for Chris and then Luke, and I'll take another round and then try to wrap up the panel.
Just on seeking advice, it's unfortunately one of those things where there's so many people out there who claim to be, the best of the best and the best knowledge and the best people out there. And a lot of the time, people's experience of getting advice from a lawyer will be probably 1 of 3 times in their life that they'll ever do it, when they get, when they're buying a house, when they're getting divorced, or when they die. So it's a really difficult thing to navigate and to be sure about. We know some good people. Chris is a really great lawyer, and there's lots of other firms out there that might be local to you that are good. The Immigration Lawyers Practitioners Association has a database of immigration lawyers that are registered with them, and that can be really, really helpful resource to finding people. All immigration solicitors, so solicitors, on their website, they have to specify what their charges are for immigration applications. So it's always good to go there and have a look for those fees on the website to make sure what the costs are likely to be. So you've got a bit of an idea as to what the fees are that might be involved. Also ringing up and asking to speak to people. The other thing to do is speak to friends, find out who if you know somebody who's been and had a lawyer and gone through the process. Word of mouth is often a really good way of finding good help. But as I say, there's the ILPA website where there's some really, really good resources there about where to get advice from if you're looking for it. What was the other thing you were wanting to touch on, Alexandra?
If one of you could touch on to the being married to a British citizen or in a civil partnership, and how this kind of impacts the application.
I'm not practicing anymore, Chris. I'm not allowed to answer these questions.
Yes, that's fine. But we know that you very much could do. I know that. Being married to a British citizen does not affect you or doesn't protect you in the sense from the CSI requirement if that's your scenario, if you've established that you were someone who might have required CSI, being married to a British citizen doesn't alter that position, because it's very unlikely the British citizen is exercising free movement rights because they'll be in the UK, and therefore they can't give you any sort of protection because it's an EU law requirement. If your marriage is to another EU national, then it may well be that you can derive like a protection from the CSI requirement from your spouse if they were like working, for example. That's why I say it can be more complicated than just what was I doing. If you're a family member of someone who is active as a worker or as a self-employed person, actually you will be protected from the CSI requirement by being part of their family unit. So it can be more complicated, as if we needed any more complication out there. But in terms of being married to a British citizen, it's not going to alter the CSI scenario. All that it does, and the other thing is to say that there's no automatic, because quite often, and I fully understand why people will ask this question, is I married a British person 30 years ago. Surely, other than the fact I love them dearly, I must have got some benefit out of this marriage to a British citizen. And the answer is generally no, because you can't obtain automatic citizenship rights just because you're married to someone. Nothing happens to you automatically with British nationality if you're not born British. It's something you have to apply to become a British citizen. So if you're married to a Brit a long time, or if you've just married someone this week who's British, it's not going to give you anything automatically. All it does really for nationality purposes is it shortens down your qualifying period, which is about how long your absences, how many absences you have to record, and it just shortens it down to 3 years. So you only have to give information about the last 3 years in your application rather than a 5-year qualifying period. So that's, generally speaking, that's where there's an advantage. Oh, sorry, and the other advantage is you don't have to wait for 12 months. If you've got your settled status today, you can apply tomorrow for British citizenship. You don't have to wait for 12 months because you're married to a British national. If you're not married, you have to show that you've had permanent status, settled status for at least 12 months before you make your application. So those are the two things that benefit you.
Thank you for that, Chris. Last round of questions, and then I'll allow each panelist to say like a minute in terms of like next steps or any kind of final comments. Last round is easier questions, right? How long, well, not so easy. How long does it generally take from the moment I apply, the moment I get a decision? Do I get any updates? Can I check the status of my application? What happens if I wait more than 6 months? Kind of like, issues to do with the waiting times, and what can we expect and what can we do about this? Then maybe a question for Luke, because it's like on policy and like the 3 million other campaigns as well. Will the 3 million focus more on citizenship in the future, and what happens with ensuring that people who have settled status actually have the best deal out of that and actually be able to feel safe with settled status if they don't want to apply for British citizenship? So maybe first to maybe Chris, in terms of the waiting times and your experience so far, in terms of how the process is going on at the moment, especially now during the pandemic, and then then Luke on the 3 million, or Luke and Lara as well on the 3 million campaigns. So Chris first.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I mean, the Home Office, their standard processing time is supposed to be within 6 months. So it could be less than 6 months, but they're not. They say that we try to make applications on nationality within 6 months. The reasons that they wouldn't do that is if there's a complication to the application, then that can push it beyond. And I think also just the Home Office not being as well resourced as it needs to be certainly since COVID began has definitely had an impact on processing times. I would say before COVID, generally I would have received a citizenship application back within 3-4 months. it's not necessarily. I'm always sort of happy if it meets the 6 months now. So it's really difficult because if you're within the 6 months, really, there's no point in even contacting the Home Office, because they will say, well, we haven't even gone over our normal processing time, so we don't want to talk to you. At 6 months, if you go over that, you can ask them for an update, but typically they won't give you too much information. There's no way of really interacting with the Home Office. And even if you spoke to someone who could identify you had an application pending, they wouldn't give you any information about it. You're not really given those kind of updates. It's definitely a really negative aspect of the system, is that people aren't really able to engage with the dialogue with the Home Office. There's not a great deal that can be done, if I'm honest. When someone says to me, oh, well, when can you do something about a delay? If we're not talking about over 12 months, then generally I wouldn't even be. So I just have to say I'm really sorry. It's just how it is. Because we know, and Luke will know this, is lawyers who've tried to push on delays before, courts push back. They're very willing to accept the Home Office explanation that they're trying to do their best job that they can. So the courts don't really want to engage about delay situations unless they get very, very long. So sorry to say about that, but it's just about being patient sometimes. But fingers crossed, hopefully everyone gets it within the 6 months.
Luke?
Yeah, so as ever with delays and things like that, it's all about resources and how the Home Office is working, and that those are political decisions. Ultimately, they are decisions taken by civil servants and the government about where it puts its resources. If you end up in a situation where you are facing these ridiculous delays, it's absolutely something to speak with a member of Parliament about. You may not get a guaranteed solution, and indeed the Home Office has the tendency to fob people off, but it is a political issue. And if you can get a good MP championing you, that sometimes can help, but often doesn't. Speaking of politics and campaigning, so citizenship has always been a real cornerstone issue for the constituency that we represent, which is EU citizens like you and your family. It's a really core element of, for some people, as Lara was saying, about belonging in our communities. And we are keen to bring down barriers, be they cost, be they ridiculous requirements that don't make any sense, such as comprehensive sickness insurance. So we'll continue to strive and drive forward this agenda with other organisations. If you want to get involved, if you want to support us, there's many ways that you can do that. Even if it's just writing a letter to somebody, it will make the difference. Making a donation to us would also make a difference. Signing up to our newsletter would be amazing as well, just to keep abreast of what we are doing and when we are doing it. There are some really key moments coming up over the next few weeks and months, particularly around citizenship. And I know that sometimes it feels like putting pen to paper and writing to members in Parliament, so that's both the Commons and the Lords, seems futile. I want to dispel you of that misconception. It does make a difference if everybody does it. And if you are impacted by this, members in Parliament do hear this stuff. I think one thing we've learned over the last few weeks is the power of people writing to their members of Parliament about parties in number 10. The outrage of that is not driven just by the media, it is driven by the public. And those same things, and whilst I'm not trying to create an equivalence between parties in parliamentary offices and barriers to citizenship, the equivalence that we can draw is that its strength comes from when people participate and write and get involved. Please join us, please sign up, please watch out for what we do. It doesn't take much, but it would be great as and when we need help that people get involved. Sorry, Lara, I'm probably stealing so many of your lines there and getting carried away. So over to you.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I was going to ask Lara and then Chris as well to have any kind of final comments or sum up on any points that weren't addressed before, because I think you already had your call to action, Look, and I post all the links in the chat just to say, because people saying I can't really copy paste it from the chat. It will all be in an email sent to you later today or tomorrow with the recording and the link, so don't worry about copying it if it doesn't work. So yeah, Lara, over to you.
And just continuing, if you're here, you probably are already on our mailing list and receive our newsletters. So just read that when you get to your inbox, because often there is very useful information. Sometimes you will hear about a webinar like this, sometimes you'll hear a call to action, sometimes you will be told about another event that it might be worth you attending. And as Alex said as well, there will be a follow-up email with information. But another thing that is useful for you to do is for you to share your story with us. So I just posted a link in the chat, but I know that the chat is going quite fast with people saying lots of comments. So as I said, there will be a follow-up email with that. But that link will take you to a Google form. So you can, for example, if you're someone like me who had a personal barrier with citizenship, as in with the comprehensive sickness insurance requirement, you can share that with us. And our colleague Andrea, who is hopefully somewhere in the audience, will be in touch with you and will help you develop that personal story so that we can make use of that narrative and actively illustrate how those barriers affect people on a day-to-day basis, because it's all well and good for us to talk about the theory and for us to talk about numbers, but there's a lot of power when we talk about people's active individual experiences. So in the past, Alexandra and I have written articles for the Metro and other publications. So it might be you in the future writing about your personal experience with citizenship, or if you for any reason have been affected by settled status or inability to check your status, also do share that story with us. If you are a migrant who don't have the right to vote in any election, also share that story with us, because that's really, really important. But as Luke said, every now and again, we need your help, because MPs and local councillors do pay attention to what people say, and it does really matter when you write to them, and we will help you with all of the resources. We just need you to do a little bit of the work in writing to who represents you.
Thank you very much, Lara. Chris, any final thoughts on like any of the questions or anything, any burning questions?
Look, I think what's been said in the last sort of 5 minutes is massively important. I wouldn't want to take anything away from that. I think the one thing I would just say from what I've seen in the chat board, and thank you for everyone who's posted questions. I want to say sorry for if someone feels like we couldn't address their issue or something, that because when I was going through them, and we've all been going through them, firing off answers, some of the reason why sometimes you're reluctant to engage is because you know that you don't want to give someone you're trying to answer something in a straightforward way, which may not be straightforward. And this is what this whole session has been about, is just this from the sort of application side and people thinking about becoming nationals, British nationals. It's just, it really is a minefield sometimes. And that's why we haven't engaged, or why with everything that we've seen, we've tried to, obviously there's a large volume. And it is, it was reminded me once again, as if I needed reminding, just how difficult I'm sure it must be for people to navigate through some of this stuff. So the resources that are up there are really good to read. And I would encourage anyone thinking about becoming British to take time to read the resources that these guys have at the 3 Million Young Europeans put together, because we just don't want people to sort of find themselves like in a situation where it's gone wrong for some reason, because it'll be nothing to do with you. It will be to do with the complexity of the system, and so not to create fear, but just to take time, think about the things that the resources have, and ultimately it may involve speaking to someone who does have that kind of understanding of the law, because it can be such a difficult thing to navigate. And it's, as I say, it's nothing to do with anyone on this call's ability to understand it. It's a very, very difficult system to negotiate, unfortunately, and an expensive one, as we all know. But hopefully what we have been able to talk about are just these really important issues, which, as I say, has reminded me of just how much work that I have to do to keep up with it as well. So it's been a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me to the session this evening.
Thank you very much, Chris and Lara and Luke, for all your answers on the panel. We have answered at least 92 questions in like an hour and a half. And I know we still have 80 questions, open questions, but I think we did more than half, over around 200 questions, including the chat and also Facebook questions. So we try to do a huge amount in the time available. But as everyone mentioned, there will be a list of all those links and resources in a follow-up email. There are other topics we haven't really touched on, partly because, as Chris said, some of the questions are really, really detailed and would need, more conversation than like a 30-second, 1-minute answer. And also other topics are topics in themselves. So thinking about child citizenship, this could be like another webinar. And indeed, if you subscribe to the 3 Millions newsletter, you'll find out all the news when we do other webinars. So we did webinars on access to other rights. So we're thinking about maybe doing something on access to housing, or perhaps approaching the pensions and tax issues. So we will have like a series of webinars touching on the different topics as well, to inform EU citizens and their families in the UK. But for now, we have just the call to actions posted there. So share your stories with us if you have encountered barriers in applying for citizenship. Of course, volunteer with us for the citizenship campaigns, especially the call to scrap the comprehensive sickness insurance, that will need some support in terms of volunteering. And also do engage in your local community. Do tell your friends and family and other EU citizens around you what you have learned from today. Share with them the resources. If you think about, there were 300 people on the call, 600 people who will be emailed the resources. If each of you share with like two, three other people, there will be thousands of EU citizens informed only through this webinar, which is a really great outcome. And what is needed really is to share this information and those resources that are out there. So yes, thank you everyone for being with us this evening, and I hope some of you will join us in our calls to action, and we'll follow up with all the information. And thank you to the panel again. So yeah, have a good evening, and I'm sure we'll see some of you in our other sessions. Have a good evening.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.